I never thought a propane tank would become the center of my life's most satisfying revenge. But when you run a home heating oil and propane delivery service in Rutland, Vermont, you learn that winter brings out either the best or the absolute worst in people. My name is Jeremy Thompson, and I have been delivering fuel to homes across central Vermont for the past 8 years. The job pays well enough, keeps me active, and honestly, most customers are genuinely grateful when I show up with a full tank during a cold snap. Most customers. Then there was Brenda Patterson, the self-appointed queen of Maple Ridge Estates, a gated community just outside downtown Rutland that housed about 200 families in cookie-cutter colonials, with perfectly manicured lawns and homeowners association rules thick enough to use as a doorstop. I first encountered Brenda on a Tuesday morning in early February. The weather forecast had been calling for a major nor'easter to hit Vermont by Thursday evening, and my dispatch board was completely lit up with emergency delivery requests. Everyone wanted their tanks topped off before the storm hit, which made perfect sense. The last thing anyone needs during a blizzard is to run out of heat. I pulled my delivery truck up to 47 Birch Lane at exactly 9:15 in the morning. The home belonged to Robert Chen, a software engineer who worked from home and had called in a panic the day before because his tank gauge was showing less than 15%. I had assured him I would get there before the storm, and I always keep my promises. The Maple Ridge Estates entrance required a code, but I had been given the service provider override months ago when I first started making deliveries there. I punched in the numbers, the gates swung open, and I drove through without incident. Birch Lane was the third street on the left, a quiet cul-de-sac lined with bare maple trees and snow-covered yards. I was backing my truck into the Chen driveway, carefully positioning it so my hose would reach the fill pipe on the side of the house, when a silver BMW SUV came screeching around the corner and stopped directly behind my truck, blocking me in completely. A woman in her mid-40s jumped out. She wore a puffy white coat that probably cost more than my monthly rent, designer boots that had clearly never seen actual snow before this winter, and an expression of pure outrage that seemed permanently etched into her face. Her blonde hair was pulled back so tight it looked painful, and she had the kind of spray tan that reminded me of a basketball. "Excuse me," she shouted, marching toward my truck. "Excuse me, you cannot park here." I rolled down my window and gave her my professional smile, the one I reserved for difficult customers. "Good morning, madam. I am just making a delivery to this residence. I will be out of your way in about 20 minutes. "I do not care what you are doing," she snapped. "You are blocking the street. This is unacceptable. You need to move your vehicle immediately." I glanced behind me. The cul-de-sac was wide and empty. My truck was not blocking anything except her apparent desire to drive directly past this particular house at this particular moment. "Madam, I am legally parked in the homeowner's driveway making a scheduled delivery. I cannot move the truck while I am pumping propane. It is a safety issue." Her face turned an impressive shade of red. "Do you know who I am?" "I am Brenda Patterson, president of the Maple Ridge Estates Homeowners Association, and according to our community guidelines, all commercial vehicles must be parked in designated service areas, not in residential driveways." This was news to me. I had been making deliveries to Maple Ridge for over a year without anyone mentioning designated service areas. "Madam, I deliver heating fuel. People need heat. Their tanks are attached to their houses. I have to park near the house to make the delivery." "Then you should have contacted the HOA board to arrange proper parking accommodations," Brenda said, crossing her arms. "I am going to have to write you up for violation of community standards." I took a deep breath and counted to 5 in my head. "Madam, I am happy to speak with the HOA about any concerns, but right now I have a customer who needs propane before the storm hits. If you could just move your vehicle, I will complete this delivery and be on my way." "I will not move my vehicle until you move yours," she said, actually stamping her foot like a toddler. "You are in violation, and I will not enable rule-breaking behavior." This was getting absurd. I pulled out my phone and called Robert Chen, who answered on the second ring. "Hey Robert, it is Jeremy from Valley Fuel. I am in your driveway ready to fill your tank, but I have a situation. Is there any chance you can come outside for a minute?" Robert appeared at his front door 30 seconds later, looking confused. He was a thin guy in his 30s, wearing sweatpants and a hoodie, clearly in the middle of a workday. "What is going on?" Brenda immediately pivoted toward him. "Robert, I am glad you are here. This delivery person is in violation of HOA parking guidelines. All commercial vehicles must use the designated service entrance." Robert blinked at her. "Brenda, he is delivering propane to my house. My tank is literally right there." He pointed to the white propane tank visible on the side of his house. "Where else is he supposed to park?" "The service entrance is clearly marked on all community maps," Brenda said, her voice dripping with condescension. "If you had bothered to read the HOA handbook, you would know that." "I have lived here for 3 years," Robert said, his confusion turning to irritation. "No one has ever mentioned a service entrance. Every delivery I have ever gotten has parked in my driveway. Oil, propane, furniture, everything." "Well, the rules have always been there," Brenda insisted. "Just because they were not being enforced does not mean they do not exist. I am the president now, and I am ensuring compliance." I could see Robert's jaw clenching. "Brenda, there is a massive storm coming in 2 days. I need this propane. Can we please just let him do his job and discuss parking policies later?" "Rules are rules, Robert," Brenda said. "I will be submitting a formal violation notice to you as well for allowing unauthorized parking on your property." Robert looked at me, then at Brenda, then back at me. "Jeremy, how long will this take?" 20 minutes to pump the propane, maybe less," I said. "Fine," Robert said, turning to face Brenda directly. "Then she can wait 20 minutes. My house, my driveway, my delivery." Brenda's face went from red to almost purple. "You are both going to regret this. I have the authority to fine you, Robert. Up to $500 for violations like this." "Fine me then," Robert said, his voice cold. "But move your car so this man can do his job, or I will call the police and report that you are blocking a commercial vehicle from making an emergency delivery before a major storm." For a moment, I thought Brenda might actually explode. But instead, she spun on her designer boot heel, stomped back to her BMW, and pulled forward exactly 10 feet. Then she parked, got out, and stood there with her arms crossed, watching us like a disapproving school principal. I completed the delivery as quickly as possible while Brenda stared daggers at me the entire time. Robert waited outside until I finished, and as I was rolling up my hose, he leaned in close and said quietly, "I am so sorry about her. She has made everyone's life miserable since she got elected HOA president 6 months ago. 2 families have already moved out because they could not deal with her." "Not your fault," I told him. "You are paid up and your tank is full. You should be good through the storm and well into March." "Thanks, Jeremy. I really appreciate you dealing with all that." I gave him a nod, climbed back into my truck, and carefully maneuvered around Brenda's BMW. She followed me all the way to the gate in her vehicle, presumably to make sure I actually left the community. As I pulled out onto the main road, I checked her off as a strange encounter and moved on to my next delivery. That should have been the end of it. It was not. Over the next 2 days, I had 6 more deliveries scheduled in Maple Ridge Estates. Every single time I entered the community, Brenda appeared like some kind of HOA demon, blocking my truck and demanding I move to the mysterious service entrance that, as far as I could tell, did not actually exist. She called my company 4 times to complain. She sent emails to my boss with photos of my truck in customers' driveways, each one claiming I was destroying property values and creating safety hazards. She even tried to get the gate code changed to lock me out, but the HOA board apparently voted that down since multiple residents relied on fuel deliveries. By Thursday morning, the day the storm was supposed to hit, I was exhausted and frustrated. I had 3 final emergency deliveries in Maple Ridge, and I was determined to get them done before the snow started. The forecast had been upgraded to a potential historic blizzard with predictions of 30 to 40 inches of snow, wind gusts up to 70 miles per hour, and temperatures dropping to -15 before wind chill. This was serious Vermont winter, the kind that could kill you if you were not prepared. My first 2 deliveries went smoothly. Brenda must have been occupied elsewhere because I got in and out without incident. But as I pulled up to my final stop, 83 Birch Lane, I saw that silver BMW parked right across the driveway entrance, completely blocking access. I put my truck in park and sat there for a moment, trying to decide my next move. The house belonged to Margaret Walsh, a 72-year-old widow who lived alone and had called my company in near tears because her propane was at 5%. She needed this delivery desperately. I dialed Margaret's number. She answered immediately. "Jeremy, are you here?" "I am outside, Margaret, but someone has blocked your driveway. I cannot get my truck in position. Is there any other access to your tank?" "No, it is on the side of the house facing the driveway," she said, and I could hear the worry in her voice. "Oh no, is it Brenda?" She was here earlier demanding to see my heating system because she said someone reported I might be using a non-approved propane setup. I told her to leave, but she was very angry. "Do not worry, Margaret. I will figure this out. Let me make a call." I hung up and dialed the non-emergency police number. A dispatcher answered, and I explained the situation. A vehicle was blocking my ability to make an emergency fuel delivery to an elderly resident before a major storm. The dispatcher said they would send an officer out. While I waited, Brenda emerged from her house 3 doors down. Of course she lived on the same street. She walked over to my truck, that same self-satisfied expression on her face. "You cannot seem to follow simple rules, can you?" "Madam, you are blocking a driveway that is not yours and preventing me from making an emergency delivery to an elderly customer," I said, keeping my voice level. "I have called the police." "Good," she said, shocking me. "They can explain to you the proper procedures for commercial vehicles in private communities." 15 minutes later, a Rutland police cruiser pulled up. The officer, a tired-looking guy in his 40s named Officer Davis according to his name tag, got out and assessed the situation. I explained what was happening, showed him my delivery order, and pointed out that the BMW was blocking a private driveway. Officer Davis walked over to Brenda. "Madam, is that your vehicle?" "Yes, it is," Brenda said confidently. "I am the HOA president, and this commercial vehicle is in violation of our community standards. I am preventing him from breaking our rules." "Madam, you do not have the legal authority to block someone else's driveway," Officer Davis said, his tone patient but firm. "That is the homeowner's decision, not yours. I am going to need you to move your vehicle." "I will not," Brenda said, lifting her chin. This is HOA property, and I have every right to enforce our standards. Actually, madam, the individual driveways are private property belonging to the homeowners, Officer Davis said. The HOA does not own them. You are currently illegally blocking access to private property. If you do not move your vehicle, I will have to cite you for obstruction. Brenda's confidence flickered for just a moment. You would not dare. Do you know who my husband is? He is a partner at Sterling and Associates law firm. Officer Davis pulled out his citation book. Madam, for the last time, move your vehicle or I will cite you. This is harassment, Brenda sputtered. I am being persecuted for trying to maintain community standards. Officer Davis started writing. Brenda watched in disbelief for a few seconds, then finally threw up her hands, got in her BMW, and moved it exactly one house down, where she parked and got out to continue watching. Sorry about that, Officer Davis said to me. Some people have too much time on their hands. Go ahead and make your delivery. I thanked him and did exactly that. Margaret came out and gave me a huge hug when I finished, practically in tears with relief. Thank you so much, Jeremy. I do not know what I would have done. You are all set, Margaret. Stay warm and safe during the storm. As I was leaving Maple Ridge Estates for what I thought would be the last time before the blizzard, I passed Brenda standing in her front yard, on her phone, gesturing wildly. I had a feeling she was calling her lawyer husband. The storm hit that evening exactly as predicted. I watched the news from my apartment in downtown Rutland as the snow started falling, slowly at first, then picking up intensity until it was a complete whiteout. The wind howled against my windows, and the temperature plummeted. By midnight, we already had 15 inches on the ground with another day of snow still to come. Friday was a complete shutdown. The governor declared a state of emergency. All roads were closed except for emergency vehicles, and people were told to stay inside unless absolutely necessary. I spent the day in my apartment, watching movies and periodically checking my work phone for messages. There were a few, mostly people thanking us for getting their deliveries done in time, and one from my boss saying the company was closed until the roads were cleared. Saturday morning, the snow finally stopped. We had gotten 37 inches in Rutland, with drifts up to 6 feet in some places. The sun came out, turning everything into a blinding white landscape. The plows were working overtime to clear main roads, but it would be days before residential areas were fully accessible. Around noon, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I almost did not answer, assuming it was spam, but something made me pick up. Is this Jeremy Thompson from Valley Fuel? A woman's voice asked. She sounded stressed. Yes, this is Jeremy. This is Linda Morrison. I live at 79 Birch Lane in Maple Ridge Estates. I am sorry to bother you, but I am calling about my neighbor, Brenda Patterson at number 83. Do you know her? I felt a cold sensation in my stomach that had nothing to do with the temperature outside. I know who she is, yes. Well, several of us are worried about her. We have not seen her since yesterday evening, and her house looks dark. No lights on at all, and it is freezing out. Some of us walked over to check on her, and we could see our breath inside her house when we looked through the windows. We called, but she is not answering her phone. We are worried her heat is out. Have you called emergency services? I asked. Yes, but they are completely overwhelmed with actual emergencies. Frozen pipes, people stuck in cars, medical calls. They said unless we think she is in immediate danger, it could be hours before they can send someone. We are trying to reach her husband, but apparently he is stuck in Boston. He went there for work before the storm and could not get back. What do you want me to do? I asked, though I was already starting to suspect where this was going. We found her propane tank, Linda said quietly. It is empty, completely empty, and we checked her records. She was supposed to get a delivery from your company 3 weeks ago, but she canceled it. Said she had enough to make it through February. But with this cold snap and the storm, she must have run out. There it was. Brenda Patterson, the woman who had made my life hell for a week, who had blocked my deliveries, called the cops on me, threatened customers, and tried to get me fired, had run out of propane in the middle of a historic blizzard. Is she inside the house? I asked. We do not know, Linda said. Like I said, no one has seen her since yesterday evening. The house is locked up tight. We are worried she might be in there freezing, or maybe she went somewhere else. We do not know. I sat there for a moment, processing. The vindictive part of me, the part that had been harassed and blocked and cited at, wanted to say it was not my problem. She had canceled her own delivery. She had made her bed. But I am not that person, no matter how satisfying the idea might be. Give me an hour, I said. The roads are still pretty bad, but I will get there. Oh, thank you, Linda said, relief flooding her voice. We will pay whatever it costs for an emergency delivery. Several of us will chip in. Let me worry about that later, I told her. First, let me make sure she is okay. I called my boss, Tom, and explained the situation. He was quiet for a moment, then said, You do realize this is the woman who has been trying to get us banned from that entire community? I do, I said, but I cannot leave someone to freeze to death, even if she is terrible. Tom sighed. You are a better person than me. Take truck number 3. It has the best 4-wheel drive. And be careful out there. If you get stuck, call immediately. I bundled up in my heaviest winter gear, grabbed emergency supplies including a first aid kit, and headed to the depot where we kept the trucks. The roads were awful, with only one lane cleared on most streets and ice underneath the packed snow. What should have been a 15-minute drive took 45 minutes of careful, slow navigation. Maple Ridge Estates looked like a scene from a disaster movie. The entrance gate was frozen open, stuck halfway. Snow had drifted across the roads in waves, and many houses were barely visible behind enormous piles of white. I navigated carefully through the streets, following the barely visible path cleared by what looked like someone's personal plow. A small group of people was waiting outside Brenda's house when I arrived. Linda introduced herself, along with 3 other neighbors. Robert Chen, who I had delivered to earlier that week, Margaret Walsh, and a younger woman named Diana Foster. They all looked cold and worried. Any change? I asked. No, Robert said. We have been knocking and calling. Nothing. All right, I said. First things first. I need to check if she is actually inside and if she is okay. If the house is locked, we might need to call the police to do a welfare check. The back door is unlocked, Deanna said quietly. I checked. I know it is not right, but we were worried. I looked at the group. They were genuinely concerned about Brenda despite her being, from what I could gather, universally disliked. That said something about them. Okay, I said. I am going to go in and check on her. Everyone else stay here. I walked around to the back of the house, my boots crunching through the deep snow. The back door was indeed unlocked. I opened it slowly, calling out, Mrs. Patterson, Brenda. This is Jeremy Thompson from Valley Fuel. Your neighbors are worried about you. I am coming in to make sure you are okay. The house was absolutely frigid inside. I could see my breath forming clouds in front of my face. The heating system was clearly not running. I moved through the kitchen into the living room, calling out as I went. I found her in the upstairs master bedroom, huddled under what looked like every blanket she owned. She was conscious but barely, shivering violently, her lips tinged blue. The room was so cold I felt like I was standing outside. Mrs. Patterson, I said, moving to her side. Brenda, can you hear me? Her eyes focused on me slowly. Cold, she whispered. So cold. I know, I said. I am going to get you help. Just stay with me. I called down to the neighbors. I found her. She is alive but hypothermic. Someone call 911. Now." Robert came running up with his phone already out. I heard him talking to the emergency dispatcher, explaining the situation. Meanwhile, I checked Brenda's vital signs as best I could remember from my basic first aid training. Her pulse was there but slow. She was shivering, which was actually a good sign. It meant her body was still trying to warm itself. "The ambulance will be here in about 20 minutes, Robert said. "They said to keep her warm but not to warm her up too fast. No hot water or heating pads." "Got it," I said. I looked at Brenda, this woman who had made my life miserable, and made a decision. I am going to fill her tank. Even if they take her to the hospital, this house cannot stay like this. Pipes will freeze and burst, and the damage will be catastrophic. I went back to my truck and spent the next 20 minutes working to get it positioned correctly in the snow-packed driveway. The tank fill was frozen, and I had to use a heat gun from my truck to thaw it enough to open. Then I began pumping propane into her empty tank, watching the gauge slowly climb. The ambulance arrived with 2 paramedics who immediately went to work on Brenda. They got her onto a stretcher, wrapped her in special warming blankets, and started in Roman 4. As they were carrying her out, she turned her head to look at me. "You," she whispered. "Yes, madam," I said. "You came." "Yes, madam. I was awful to you." "Yes, madam, you were." Her eyes filled with tears. Why? I thought about that for a second. Because it was the right thing to do. The paramedics took her away. Linda and the other neighbors came up to me as I was finishing the propane delivery. "How much do we owe you?" Linda asked. "Nothing," I said. "This one is on me." "Jeremy, that is not right. You did not have to do any of this." "I know," I said. But I could not live with myself if I had not. Even if she drove me crazy, no one deserves to freeze to death. Margaret Walsh gave me another hug, tears streaming down her face. "You are a good man, a truly good man." I finished filling Brenda's tank, got her heating system restarted, and waited until the house began to warm up. Robert helped me check for frozen pipes. We found 2 in the basement that had frozen but not burst yet. I showed him how to carefully thaw them with a space heater and told him to monitor them. "Why is her tank empty?" Robert asked as we were working. "She is obsessive about rules and procedures. How did she let this happen?" "Your neighbor Linda said she canceled her delivery," I told him. "Thought she had enough to get through." Robert shook his head. "That is classic Brenda. She thinks she knows better than everyone, even the professionals." Over the next week, as Rutland slowly dug out from the blizzard, I heard updates about Brenda through Linda, who kept in touch. Brenda had spent 2 days in the hospital being treated for moderate hypothermia and frostbite on her fingers and toes. She would be fine, but the doctors said if she had been alone for another few hours, the outcome could have been very different. Her husband finally made it back from Boston and was apparently horrified by what had happened. He called my company to thank me personally and tried to pay me for the emergency delivery, but I declined. Some things are not about money. The real shock came 2 weeks after the storm. I got a call from Linda again, this time with surprising news. "Jeremy, I thought you should know. The HOA board held an emergency meeting last night. They voted to remove Brenda as president." "Really?" I said, genuinely surprised. "Really?" Once people found out what happened, that she had canceled her own propane delivery out of stubbornness and nearly died because of it. And then that you were the one who saved her after she had been so terrible to you. It was like a switch flipped. People started coming forward with all these stories about her abusing her authority, making up rules, harassing residents. The board decided she was a liability. "Wow," I said. "How is she taking it?" "I do not know yet. She is still recovering at home. Her husband is taking care of her." But there is more. She wants to talk to you. She asked if you would be willing to come by. I was silent for a moment. Part of me wanted nothing to do with Brenda Patterson ever again, but another part was curious. All right, I said. When? Would today work? Around 2 o'clock. I agreed, and that afternoon found myself once again pulling up to 83 Birch Lane. This time, no one blocked my truck. The driveway had been neatly plowed, and the house looked warm and inviting with smoke coming from the chimney. Brenda's husband, a tall, distinguished-looking man in his 50s named Richard, answered the door. He shook my hand firmly. "Jeremy, thank you so much for coming, and thank you for what you did. The doctors said you saved her life." His voice was thick with emotion. "I am glad I got there in time," I said. He led me into the living room where Brenda was sitting on the couch wrapped in a blanket. She looked much smaller than I remembered, diminished somehow. Her hands were bandaged and she looked pale and tired. "Hello, Jeremy," she said quietly. "Hello, Mrs. Patterson. How are you feeling?" "Foolish," she said. "Ashamed. Grateful to be alive." She looked down at her bandaged hands. "I have been doing a lot of thinking this past week about who I am and who I have become." I sat down in the chair across from her and waited. "I was not always like this," she continued. "When Richard and I first moved here, I was excited about being part of a community. But then I got elected HOA president, and somewhere along the way, I stopped caring about the community and started caring about control, about being right, about winning." She looked up at me, tears in her eyes. "And I treated you horribly. You were just trying to do your job to help people, and I made it as difficult as possible because I needed to feel important. I needed to feel like I had power." "Mrs. Patterson," I started, but she held up a bandaged hand. "Please let me finish. You had every reason to let me freeze, to say I got what I deserved, but you did not. You came and you helped me, even after everything I did. That is real character. That is being a good person." And it made me realize how far I had fallen from the person I wanted to be. She reached for a tissue, and Richard handed her one. "I resigned from the HOA board. Well, they removed me, but I was going to resign anyway, and I am sorry. I am so deeply sorry for how I treated you." I sat there for a moment, processing. This was not what I had expected. "I appreciate the apology, Mrs. Patterson, I really do. Call me Brenda," she said. "And I know an apology is not enough, so I did something else." She nodded to Richard, who handed me an envelope. "What is this?" I asked. "Open it," Brenda said. Inside was a check for $5,000 made out to Valley Fuel and a letter on official HOA letterhead. "The check is to cover the emergency delivery and your time," Brenda explained. "I know you said I did not owe you anything, but it does not feel right to accept such generosity without giving something back. If you do not want to keep it personally, donate it to charity or use it for your business." I looked at the letter. It was addressed to Valley Fuel and basically stated that the company was formally recognized as an approved service provider for Maple Ridge Estates with unrestricted access for all deliveries, and that any future HOA leadership would honor this arrangement. The new HOA president, Marcus Bennett, signed off on it, Brenda said. "You will not have any more problems making deliveries here. I made sure of that." "I do not know what to say," I admitted. "You do not have to say anything," Brenda said. "I just hope that maybe, someday, I can be half as decent a person as you are." I left the Patterson house that afternoon with mixed feelings. On one hand, I was glad Brenda seemed to be genuinely trying to change. On the other hand, I had seen too many people claim they would do better only to slide back into old habits once the crisis passed. But over the following months, I was surprised. Brenda kept to her word. She stayed off the HOA board. She stopped harassing neighbors. I heard through Linda that she had even started volunteering at the local warming center. helping other people who were at risk during cold weather. And my deliveries to Maple Ridge Estates became the easiest part of my route. The new HOA president, Marcus, was a retired teacher who believed the HOA should help residents, not control them. He reduced the unnecessary rules, focused on actual community improvement, and made it clear that service providers like me were welcome and appreciated. I saw Brenda one more time that winter. It was late March, during one of my regular delivery rounds through Maple Ridge. She was outside her house, planting flowers in the garden boxes on her porch. Her hands had healed, though I noticed she moved a bit carefully, still mindful of what she had been through. She waved as I drove past, a genuine smile on her face. I waved back. Sometimes people do change. Sometimes a near-death experience gives someone the perspective they needed. And sometimes, doing the right thing even when you do not want it can have ripple effects you never expected. As for me, I learned something too. I learned that holding on to anger and resentment only hurts yourself. I could have let Brenda suffer the consequences of her actions. Legally and morally, I would have been in the clear. But I would have had to live with that decision for the rest of my life, and I do not think I could have. The spring came to Vermont the way it always does, slowly and then all at once. The snow melted, revealing dead grass that would soon turn green. The trees budded, the temperature climbed, and life went on. I still deliver propane and heating oil throughout Rutland and the surrounding areas. I still deal with difficult customers sometimes, though none quite as memorable as Brenda Patterson. And every time I drive through Maple Ridge Estates, I remember that winter storm and the choice I made. My phone rang one afternoon in mid-April. It was Linda again. "Jeremy, I hope you do not mind me calling," she said. "I know you are probably busy." "Not at all, Linda. What is going on?" "Well, the neighborhood is organizing a Community Appreciation Day in May. We are recognizing people who make our community better. Service providers, volunteers, teachers, that kind of thing. And we would really like you to come. We want to recognize what you did during the storm." "Oh, Linda, that is really nice, but I do not need recognition," I said. "I know you do not," she said, "but we need to give it. Please." It would mean a lot to everyone. I thought about it for a moment. "Will Brenda be there?" "She will," Linda said. "But if that makes you uncomfortable, I understand." "No," I said. "Actually, that makes me more willing to come. I want to see how she is doing." "Then you will come." "I will come." The Community Appreciation Day was held on a beautiful Saturday in May. Maple Ridge Estates had transformed from a winter wasteland into a showcase of spring beauty. Flowers bloomed everywhere. Kids played in the streets, and the community center was decorated with banners and balloons. They had set up a small stage in the community park, and various people were called up to receive certificates and recognition. There were teachers, police officers, the volunteer fire department, the postal carrier, and several others. When they called my name, I walked up to polite applause. Marcus Bennett shook my hand and presented me with a framed certificate recognizing my service to the community during the blizzard. But that was not what made the moment memorable. Brenda Patterson walked onto the stage. The crowd went quiet. "Hi, everyone," she said, her voice a bit shaky. "For those who do not know, I used to be HOA president, and I was not very good at it. In fact, I was pretty terrible." There were a few nervous laughs from the audience. I let power go to my head, and I treated people badly, including Jeremy here. I made his job harder for no good reason except that I liked being in control. And when I needed help, when I was literally freezing to death in my own home because of my own stubbornness and pride, Jeremy was the one who saved me, despite everything I had done to him. She turned to look at me directly. I learned more about character and humanity from you in that one day than I had learned in years. You showed me what it really means to be part of a community. It is not about rules and control. It is about caring for each other, even when it is hard, especially when it is hard. She started to tear up, and Richard, sitting in the front row, gave her an encouraging nod. So thank you, Jeremy. Thank you for saving my life, and thank you for showing me how to be a better person. The applause that followed was much louder this time. I shook Brenda's hand, and she pulled me into a quick hug. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. After the ceremony, I spent an hour talking with various residents, many of whom I had delivered to over the years. They were good people, and I realized that Maple Ridge Estates had never been the problem. It had just been one person in the wrong position of power at the wrong time. As I was getting ready to leave, a young couple approached me. They introduced themselves as Nathan and Grace Zimmerman, new residents who had just moved into the community the week before. We heard about what happened during the storm, Grace said. That is incredible. We are glad there are people like you around. Just doing my job, I said. Well, we are going to need propane delivery, Nathan said. Can we get your information? I gave them a Valley Fuel business card, and we chatted for a few minutes about their new house and their move from Albany. They were nice, excited about their new home and their new community. As I drove away from Maple Ridge Estates that afternoon, I felt something I had not expected: closure. The whole ordeal with Brenda, the storm, the rescue, all of it felt complete somehow. Like a chapter of my life that had been written and could now be closed. But life does not work in chapters, not really. It is more like a continuous stream where everything flows into everything else. The things we do ripple outward in ways we cannot always predict. 2 months later, in July, I was making a routine delivery to a farmhouse outside Rutland when I got a call from Tom, my boss. Jeremy, you are not going to believe this, he said, and I could hear the excitement in his voice. What is going on? You know how business has been a bit slow this summer. Well, we just got a contract to provide propane service to all 3 of the Greenfield Management HOA communities. That is over 600 homes. It is the biggest contract we have ever had. That is amazing, Tom. How did that happen? Apparently, the Greenfield Management Regional Director lives in Maple Ridge Estates. She heard about what you did during the storm and how you handled that whole situation with their former HOA president. She said any company with employees like you is the kind of company she wants to do business with. I sat there in my truck, stunned. Are you serious? Completely serious. This contract is going to double our revenue. We are going to need to hire more drivers, get more trucks. Jeremy, this changes everything for the business. That is incredible, Tom. It is all because of you, he said. Because you did the right thing even when you did not have to, so I am promoting you to operations manager. 20% raise, benefits package, and you will help me run the whole show. What do you say? What could I say? Yes, absolutely yes. That phone call changed my life. Operations manager meant more responsibility, but it also meant more stability, better pay, and the chance to help grow the business. Tom and I worked together to hire 3 new drivers over the next month, and we purchased 2 additional trucks to handle the increased demand. The Greenfield Management contract proved to be even better than expected. The homes were well maintained, the residents were generally friendly, and the HOA leadership across all 3 communities was professional and easy to work with. It was everything Maple Ridge could have been if Brenda had never gone on her power trip. By the time winter came around again, Valley Fuel was thriving. We had expanded our service area, hired a total of 5 new employees, and were looking at opening a second location in the spring. and I was running daily operations, managing schedules, handling customer relations, and making sure our drivers had everything they needed to do their jobs safely and efficiently. I still made deliveries sometimes, usually covering routes when someone was sick or during particularly busy periods. I liked staying connected to that part of the business, to the actual hands-on work that had taught me so much about people and service. It was during one of those fill and delivery days in late January, almost exactly a year after the blizzard, that I found myself back in Maple Ridge Estates. Brenda Patterson was due for her regular delivery. I pulled up to 83 Birch Lane, and this time there were no silver BMWs blocking my path. The driveway was clear, and I could see that Brenda had her Christmas lights still up, the kind that twinkled in different colors and made the house look festive and welcoming. I was setting up my hose when Brenda came out, bundled up in a much more practical winter coat than the designer one she had worn the previous year. "Jeremy," she said, smiling, "I thought you were management now. What are you doing out here making deliveries?" "One of my drivers has the flu," I explained. "I am covering his route today." "Well, it is good to see you. How are you doing?" "Really well, actually. Business is booming. We have expanded quite a bit." "I heard," Brenda said. "Linda told me about the Greenfield contract. That is wonderful." "You deserve it. Thank you." She hesitated for a moment, then said, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you think people can really change? Like, fundamentally change who they are?" I thought about that question carefully. "I think people can change their behaviors and their choices. Whether the fundamental person changes, I do not know, but I do think you can decide to be better than you were, and that decision matters." Brenda nodded slowly. "I think about that a lot, about who I was and who I want to be. It is hard work changing, harder than I expected." "But you are doing it," I said. "That is what counts." "I hope so," she said quietly. I finished her delivery, and as I was packing up my hose, Brenda called out to me, "Jeremy, wait, I have something for you." She went inside and came back with a small wrapped package. "What is this?" I asked. "Just a little thank you gift. For everything. Do not open it until you get home." I took the package, thanked her, and headed back to my truck. I had 4 more deliveries to make that day, so I did not think about the package again until I was home that evening. I sat down on my couch and carefully unwrapped it. Inside was a handmade wooden box, beautifully crafted with inlay work showing a winter scene, a house in the snow, a delivery truck in the driveway, and a star shining overhead. On the bottom of the box was a small brass plate engraved with words, "To Jeremy, who showed me that heroes do not need capes. They just need compassion. Thank you for saving my life. Brenda." I opened the box. Inside was a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it to find a letter written in careful handwriting. "Dear Jeremy, I have started this letter a dozen times and never quite found the right words. How do you thank someone for saving your life? How do you apologize for being the worst version of yourself? The truth is, you cannot. Not adequately, but I can try. This past year has been the hardest and the best of my life. Hard because I had to confront who I had become, bitter, controlling, mean-spirited. I did not like what I saw, but the best because I have been given a chance to be different, to be better. And that chance came from you. You could have let me suffer the consequences of my actions. You could have driven past my house and told yourself I deserved whatever happened. No one would have blamed you, but you did not. You came, you helped, you saved me. In doing so, you saved more than my life. You saved my soul. I know that sounds dramatic, but it is true. I was dying long before I ran out of propane. I was dying from the inside out, killed by my own pride and need for control. You gave me a chance to live differently. I am volunteering now at the warming center every week. I help coordinate deliveries for people who cannot afford heating fuel. I have met so many people who are struggling, and I try to help in whatever small ways I can. It does not make up for how I acted, but it is a start. Richard says I am happier now than I have been in years. He is right. Turns out being kind is a lot more fulfilling than being in control. I do not expect us to be friends. I do not deserve that. But I hope you know that you changed a life. You changed my life. And I will spend the rest of my days trying to pay that forward. With deepest gratitude, Brenda Patterson. I read the letter twice, then carefully folded it and placed it back in the box. I set the box on my bookshelf, where I could see it every day. That night, lying in bed, I thought about the past year, about how a simple propane delivery had turned into a life or death situation, about how anger and resentment could have led me to make a very different choice, about how one decision to do the right thing had created ripples that changed multiple lives, including my own. I thought about Brenda and her journey from a controlling HOA president to someone trying to make amends and help others. I thought about my own journey from a delivery driver to operations manager of a growing company. And I thought about how interconnected we all are, how the choices we make affect people in ways we cannot always predict or understand. The human experience is strange that way. We are all just stumbling through life, trying to figure it out as we go, making mistakes and hopefully learning from them. Sometimes we hurt people. Sometimes we help people. Sometimes we get chances to do better. And sometimes, if we are very lucky, someone shows us who we could be instead of who we are. I fell asleep that night feeling grateful. Grateful for the life I had built, grateful for the opportunities that had come my way, and grateful that when the moment came, I had made the choice to help rather than to hurt. The years that followed continued to bring changes. Valley Fuel grew into one of the most respected fuel delivery companies in central Vermont. We opened that second location, then a third. I moved up to director of operations, overseeing a staff of 23 employees across 3 locations. Tom eventually retired and sold me the business, and I became the owner of the company that had given me my start. Through it all, I never forgot that day during the blizzard. I never forgot the lesson it taught me about compassion, about doing the right thing even when it is hard, about how we treat people mattering more than we realize. I made it company policy that we would always prioritize emergency deliveries, especially for elderly customers or those in vulnerable situations. We established a hardship fund to help people who could not afford fuel during tough times. And we trained all our drivers to treat every customer with respect and dignity, no matter how difficult they might be. Because you never know. You never know when someone is one bad day away from a breakthrough. You never know when your choice to be kind might save more than just a life. Brenda and I stayed in occasional contact over the years. She never stopped volunteering at the warming center. She and Richard eventually moved to a smaller house, downsizing now that their kids were grown. But before they moved, she made sure to introduce me to the new owners of 83 Birch Lane and to tell them what great service they would get from Valley Fuel. The last time I saw her was at the warming center's annual fundraiser 5 years after the blizzard. She was helping to coordinate the event and she looked genuinely happy. When she saw me, she came over and gave me a hug. "Jeremy, thank you for coming, and thank you for the company's donation. That was incredibly generous." "It is a good cause," I said, "and you are doing great work here." "I am trying," she said. "Every day I am trying to be the person you believed I could be." "You are already that person, Brenda. You have been for a while now." She smiled, and I saw tears in her eyes. "That means more than you know." As I drove home that night, I realized something. The story was not about revenge at all. The title that had been in my head all those years ago, about letting her propane run empty, about getting back at her for all the trouble she caused, it was never the real story. The real story was about second chances, about choosing compassion over anger, about how the hardest moments can become the most meaningful, about how sometimes the people who are the most difficult are the ones who need help the most. I did not let Brenda's propane run empty out of spite. I filled her tank when it had already run empty when she needed it most, when she had given me every reason not to help. And that decision changed everything for her, for me, for everyone our lives touched afterward. That is the thing about being human. We are all capable of being both our worst and our best selves. We all have moments when we are Brenda, caught up in our own importance, hurting people without even realizing it. And we all have moments when we have to decide. Will we respond to cruelty with more cruelty, or will we choose to be better? I chose to be better. And it made all the difference. So yes, there was an HOA Karen who blocked my delivery van. Yes, she made my life difficult and treated me terribly. And yes, her propane did run empty during a historic blizzard, but the end of that story was not revenge. It was redemption, for both of us, and that is a much better story to tell.